And welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Rust, the infamous game out there for having this brutal survival multiplayer game where you can go from just having nothing to having the in-game materials just right at the beginning. Just it is very skill-based. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. This is Sir Jobulus,
This is IPP, my kids IRL.
and let's get into it. And to start us off, naked, just how you start in this game. We're going to start just at the beginning of this review, naked with just a rock and a torch, because the survival aspect of this game is what's really kind of defined this genre of survival multiplayer games, because it's a really good progression system as you gather resources. You start in an area that you're more prone to find the starting resources, so cloth and wood. And as you progress into other areas in the snowy mountainous terrain, you're going to find the ores that you're going to need and stone that you're going to need to build up into the next tier of of building and just weapons in general as well. And so throughout the game, you're always going to have to monitor water and your food levels. In other games like Escape from Tarkov, you're going to find in those games this that when it comes to food and water, it's not necessarily as important. You can you can handle it much better. In this game, you have to keep an eye on it, or otherwise it's going to run very afoul for you soon if you just don't keep an eye on it. So it's something that you just always have to be aware of as you just progress in this game.
Also,
Now,
around the talking more about the map and where you're going to be starting at whenever you first open up and you're sitting on the beach naked with your rock, you're going to be wanting to pull open your map and taking a look at your surroundings. And that'll kind of differ based on what server you're in. Each server kind of has like and that kind of goes a little bit back to the whole server selection, which we'll get to a little later. But each server is going to have a different size, and those sizes can range from about 4,000 kilometers down to about, I believe, 2,000. So the map's incredibly large. You're going to have plenty of space to move around and do whatever you want to and build however you want to. So the map itself is going to have several monuments, and they're almost going to be like tiered. You're going to see launch site, maybe even close to military tunnel, and then down to tier 2, which I believe is the train yard, the power station. And these will all have unique things that will go into them. You're going to have key cards, for instance. You're going to find them while you're looting. You're going to have different ways to get into the monuments. Each one's going to require maybe even a puzzle, which you're probably going to have to look up how to get into at first. You're probably not going to be able to figure it out your first time around unless you're really good at figuring out the puzzles and want to tying back all the electricity conduits and tracing everything all back together. But a lot of it, though, and each one will have dangers. For instance, there will be scientists guarding it on the large oil rig out in the middle of the ocean, for instance. That's a little bit of a newer one that came within the year or two. So these monuments all play a great aspect in where you want to start up your first base, where you want to start up, and what kind of traffic in the area you're going to want to be around. Are you wanting to be in the snow and next to all the farmers? Because you might find yourself getting raided in the middle of the night. But if you place yourself in one of the tier 1 zones, you might find yourself surviving a lot while longer, which is actually what me and Sir Chubulus did on this past recording for the wipe that we were talking about right now to get a fresh experience back in the Rust. We decided to go ahead and go back into it. So in our experience, we went from a tier 1 area down to just, I think, around tier 2, but with the newest addition of the tunnels, for instance, which added a whole new depth of how to play the game, and it allows for so much more sneaking. You just come back to Rust maybe once a year, you're going to find that this game has so much more content to offer than the last time you played it. You know, if we were to go back and play Escape from Tarkov, there wouldn't be a single difference of the things that happened within the past year. You shoot, you die. In this game,
that's
there's
right.
so many ways to play it right now, and it feels so good. We came back to it. We were not expecting the game to be this much fun on our 2-week wipe, for instance, whenever we were playing.
That's right. And it's just really important to talk about when we're talking about all these monuments in these different areas, even the tunnels. It's amazing to think every single bit of it is procedurally generated. When you come back, depending upon whether you play on an official server or whether you play on modded servers or community servers, each one's going to have a different wipe cycle. And when you come back, the map is going to be different every single time. It's
Absolutely.
truly it's truly amazing to think that they have all that built in to create a truly unique system every single time. And so just jumping into the building is just one of the biggest components of this game because you're going to need somewhere to store all your loot. This game so many other games have copied Rust's system just because it's that good. They are just constantly coming out with just updates to how you build the system and the way that all the units click together. It's very smooth. It's very intuitive with the
And
building. There's You can go on YouTube and find so many builders out there
oh my gosh,
and
so
copy the
many.
build designs. Yeah, and
And you
so
can just
a lot
snatch
of
them
them are
up for
very
yourself.
unique. That's right. And so the and even when as you go into what you can place into your building, right? There's so many things from just making sure that you cook your foods and there's different tiers and storing all your loot, your TC as well. There's just a ton that you can put into your house. And it's also just to also tie in the survival aspect of just the building, there's also upkeep on your building as well. So, for instance, if your building is mainly stone, you're going to have to keep putting stone into your TC or your tool cupboard in order to keep it non-damaged because if
Slowly
you don't
decaying.
keep the upkeep, there you go, better way of describing it is it's going to decay over time. And so and then there's also a different tier system of workbenches in the game as well that just allow a different level of progression. Rust is starting to really tie in a lot of RPG elements with this type of progression here because you have different things that you have to research in order to progress to some of the bigger, more blueprints that you need to learn in order to be as best as you can out there in the world.
Exactly. In the tech trees, for instance, and I feel like this ties back to the RPG elements, and the reason why we came back to this game was to test out these new features, for instance. We had no idea that whenever you opened up the tech trees, they would be this diverse. I mean, there is so much to do. There's growing plants. You can have specific genes in your plants. It's not really too rewarding right now. I would imagine later on it will be because they're adding so many new layers on top of this. Like you can even make your own teas. You can go into mixing. You go into electricity. Electricity is an insane thing
Oh,
right now.
huge.
There's so much to do right now. And if you're a part of a group, I would highly recommend people to specialize in something they enjoy in. There is something for everyone, whether you're, I hate to say it, a farmer, to a PvPer, to being an electrician, to farming, with potatoes, different ways to grow, and then also a builder. I mean, these are not easy things to accomplish, and this is the reason why one of our biggest knocks to this game is how much of a time investment it's going to be and how much incentive there is for clans to roam around. And
Oh man,
the
yes.
clans, they really we've been playing duo games for forever. That's what we kind of specialized in, and you hate to see these clans. And on the footage I'm gonna show y'all what it was like to go up against the clan that was right next to us. It literally forced us off the server because with having full-time jobs, going to school, this is hard to keep up with. There's a lot that going on, and these guys, we knew we had to go out and raid that night. Even though it was a fail, we still had to go out and use our resources because we
We were
knew
gonna lose
that
it.
night they were gone. They were going to make sure we were not there that next day. And lo and behold, I logged in, found myself dead, and blown all the way to the TC. So it incentivizes you to be in a clan, but it does reward solo players in a way where you can be sneaky. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the YouTubers out there like Wellen, they play with like 2 or 3 people. Alone in Tokyo is another great one who plays completely solo and goes up against Zergs. These players have really found their niche and they're really good at it. They know how to maneuver around groups of people and they know how to be sneaky. And that's their playstyle. They're really good at it. So it's a joy to see what people are able to come up with, but it forces you to think outside of the box. It will promote you to think outside of the box, whether you're in a brainless Zerg or you're playing by yourself and you've got to. We relocated probably about 3 or 4 times in this wipe for about a week. So it just goes to show you that you're going to need a lot of time in this game. Frustrating, and even just the time. So let's go into the combat, because that's going to be kind of what we round this out with, and kind of the toughest thing to nail down is really about how we feel about the combat, for instance, and the shooting aspect, because it doesn't feel stale. It just feels the same it kind of feels like League of Legends, but it hasn't changed in a long time. And the same guns have been running over everyone, which is the AK and the LR. And then you have the M249, which you don't really want to include in this because it's such an extreme commodity and you really only use it a handful of times.
You're not going to run out with it on a daily basis.
Exactly.
But the combat, because when you're in this space of other games that are also just in this genre, you're talking about games like EFT, for instance, where EFT has is just the shooter experience is just leagues beyond Rust, and with how much time Rust has have, just from the time that production on this game started to where we are now, we are just years past at that point of how long Rust has been alive versus EFT. EFT just has a much better shooter experience. Just with all the guns, the recoil is a literal S. It starts and it just curves up like an S. What you can do is you can actually control the recoil just by practicing with your mouse. So you can do it backwards. You do a backwards S to control the recoil. So there's virtually no recoil if you can master the motion of your mouse. And so when it comes down to something like this, it's like you guys have done everything else to this game, but the main experience in this game, it just falls short. It fails expectations. And really, when you think about just the weapon the amount of weapons in the game, for because the majority of the game you're going to be shooting a gun. It's just how it is.
You might be stuck on primitive like us.
Yeah, we get stuck on primitive a lot. But when you get a gun though, it means something. And you got to be good with it, and you got to have control with it. And so it's important to just know your guns, but I would really like to see a more diverse amount of guns in the game.
Or even just going into the diverse modifications within the guns. Because that's something that's been talked about. But I feel like compared to the other things that they have going on right now, I'm not going to sit here and tell Facepunch what to do. They obviously are doing a good job. But I would just like to see some sort of modification comes to the guns to change how the players would like to. Because the AK is really like a one breed kind of person, and that's where I kind of have a struggle with it. Like, there's people that will just give up not using the AK and just stick to maybe using the custom, the MP5. The LR is, and there's tiers. There's two types of guns. There's the military guns, and then there's the homemade guns that you make at the workbench. The workbench guns all do the most damage to their comparative partners. For instance, like the DB or the pump action compared to the spaz. The spaz will shoot faster and the pump will maybe do a little bit more damage. And the bolt action versus the L96. The L96 is just leagues better than the bolt action. It has almost no drop. It's just point and click. The LR is even feels like an S, but it just feels less of an S. It's just right. That's the way it feels. And and they've brought in new guns. They brought in the SAR counterpart, which is the M39, and whenever I saw that, I was like, man, finally we're getting some updated guns. Finally we're starting to see.
That was it.
That was it. That was it for. To this day, the M39, I believe, was the last gun added to the game, which was, I think, only dropped from Bradley. I think the Bradley was the only way to get it. They might have implemented some new ways.
How long ago was that? How long ago was that?
The Bradley's probably been around for at least 2 or 3 years, I would imagine. At least 2 or 3.
And EFT drops guns every patch. That's the one thing that they do well, is they drop guns consistently that they're adding to the, because that's what they know you're doing most of in this game. So, but it's really important just to drive home this one point, and it's just that Facepunch is pushing out content for this game every month.
Yes,
it is something that we just need to point out, because even if you take a break from this game for a couple of months and then come back, you're going to be guaranteed to have a fresh experience. Just in 3 months, that's just a lot of, that's because they do patches at the beginning of every month, and so you're almost guaranteed to have something that you're going to try out differently. So it's just nice to know that they're just continuing to just produce content for this game.
Absolutely. And so, guys, that's going to wrap us up here with the main part of discussion. We're going to move on to our final thoughts of the game and give our rating of the game, and let you know our final thoughts on the game. So I'll start off first real quick. The game feels great. The shooter experience, kind of like how we've just discussed, is the only really knack that I have for this game, and also the time investment. It's hard to play this game whenever you have a full-time job. Exiting college and going into the workforce, as going in full-time, I won't probably ever be able to play vanilla almost ever again, unless I were to somehow do YouTube full-time. The YouTubers are really the only ones where you're going to get a joyful YouTube experience, because the people that honestly watch Rust probably get a better experience than probably half the people playing Rust. So I would just recommend people to, if you're in high school and college, take advantage of playing Rust with a group of friends. That's the one thing I would recommend. It's a huge time investment. It's fun with a group of friends that you trust. I wouldn't recommend too much about feeling the need to go into a clan. You kind of lose a little bit of the immersive experience whenever you start to play with a clan, because they want you to do a whole bunch of things. Take the game at your own pace. You're going to get raided. You will get raided. There is no way around that. We've been raided and had tons of hours of content, or not really content, but loot lost. And that kind of ended our experience. We were done. That was it for the 2 weeks, and we hop back on the next. So with all that being said, I love this game. I have 2,500 hours on it. Probably about 500 of it is AFK hours, so I'll round it out to about 2,000. So with that being said, I've loved this game since the very first Legacy. I played it during that. That's where I had my first 300 hours, back when there was zombies still in the game. So with all that being said, I'm going to give this game a 9.1.
And what really makes Rust stand out to me, and it's just the survival aspect of this game. It is just going out, taking other people's stuff, claiming it for your own, and all the while just you're killing people. You're making them go off the server, right? Kind of like how we just discussed with just the clans, right? You go and take other people's stuff, you kick them off the server. It's part of the game, and it really makes this game a very fun PvP experience. But, but as IPVP has already mentioned, it's the same reasons why I have also knocked this game, which is the amount of time that you have to invest in this game, and also the shooter experience. For again, just to reiterate, for how far along this game is, I would expect a better shooter experience. It just leaves much to be desired for the shooter experience with the recoil. You would think that they'd have a better system in place for that, and also just the time investment as well. It's literally just the reason why I don't play this game more. The, it really takes you to play this game a little bit to understand exactly what we're talking about. The people that are playing Rust are currently and are hearing this, you know exactly what we're talking about, and it is just gear fear. You you can't log off for too long and not think, man, am I getting rated right now? There were some people that I just pissed off over there. I wonder if they're just rating me now. So, or people will literally wait till you are offline
Yes.
to raid you. It's
Yes.
one of the most toxic things about this game, and you just have to come to the realization that that's going to happen to you at some point, and you're going to lose maybe a day, maybe even a couple of days worth of progress. But on the other hand, this game is one of the best. It is one of the best out there in this genre, and they do everything else perfect with the amount of content that they push. The PvE, even though PvE is not a main component of this game, they do it well with dungeons, progress, base building, resources, survival. All these other aspects of this game make this game truly great, and makes it stand out above the rest. So with that being said, I'm going to rate this game also as a 9.1. And as BGN, that gives this game an official rating a 9.1. So to wrap things up, guys, thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe for us, and it really does help us grow. So without further ado, this is Sir Jobulus,
This is IPVP Kids IRL.
and you guys stay frosty out there.